rest in peace. I believe I have made that effort, and that is therefore why I will sleep for the eternity.
It has been my great privilege to serve a people whose bondage to an inhuman system evoked the solidarity of all those who love freedom and justice.
Nelson Mandela, his name synonymous with the struggle and eventual triumph over South Africa's legacy of apartheid. A national treasure celebrated by the crowds at the World Cup finals in his home country. It was the last time many saw Mandela in public. A former boxer, Mandela was an advocate of nonviolence, becoming a leading voice in the African National Congress, the ANC. But in 1960, after police shot and killed 69 protesters, the ANC, which had always been nonviolent, created a military wing under Mandela's command.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and nonviolence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks.
Undaunted by the brutality and inequality that was the hallmark of apartheid rule, Mandela remained determined to end the government's forced racial segregation.
Our struggle is a truly national. It is a struggle for the right to live.
A struggle that led to Mandela's imprisonment in 1962, and 2 years later, a life sentence for working to overthrow the government.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an idea for which I am prepared to die.
4 miles off the coast of Cape Town, South Africa, on Robben Island, Mandela spent most of 27 years cut off from the world, but not forgotten.
Free Nelson Mandela!
Mr. Nelson Mandela will be released at the Victor Verster prison.
Good evening. This was Nelson Mandela's first full day of freedom.
Released at the age of 72 in 1990, he remained ever vigilant that his country and its freedoms rested in the hands of the people.
I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant.
And for the people of South Africa, Mandela's release after nearly 30 years of imprisonment ushered in a new era of hope and the end of apartheid.
Today, the majority of South Africans, black and white, recognize that apartheid has no future.
In 1993, Mandela, along with South Africa's President F.W. de Klerk, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And in 1994, Mandela's dream was realized when black South Africans cast their first ballots in a democratic election, and Mandela became South Africa's first black president.
We are all South Africans. We have had a good fight, but now this is the time to heal the old wounds and to build a new South Africa.
After ruling for 5 years,
Africa!
Nelson Mandela passed the torch to the next generation and became an elder statesman to the world, a fighter, a visionary, the voice of his people, and a moral compass for us all.
I am the product of Africa and her long and cherished dream of a rebirth that can now be realized so that all of her children may play in the sun.
His life dedicated to that dream. Maybe he's Christian Amanpour joins us now. And Christian, you covered the struggle in South Africa, his early days as president. And one of the points you make is that he kept the country together at a time it could have easily been torn apart.
Absolutely. And in fact, his people say that it is a miracle that they pulled off that first election. Just as he came out of prison, there was still terrible violence from the Inkatha party, the Zulus, from the extremist white parties. There were killings and deaths. They pulled it off, and it was remarkable. remarkable. If you ask people around the world who is their greatest hero, just about everybody will tell you Nelson Mandela because of his moral courage. And they say he didn't have bitterness, but actually what he did was triumph over that bitterness, that resentment, that hatred for having been deprived of his life and his freedom. And he said, you know, I could have been bitter, but that would have been to give in to death and defeat. And I think that is his absolute strength and his legacy.
And so much of what you just said, you have lived and worked around the world, and you're right. It was like everybody was familiar with Nelson Mandela. And it is unique when your legacy goes beyond your homeland.
Oh, absolutely, and you can see the tributes that have been pouring in today. The Queen of England, the Prime Minister, obviously everybody here in the United States, all around the world, and in Africa. You know, one of the most incredible things, I've interviewed a lot of dictators, and I asked them, who are your heroes? And you know what? Without a sense of a shred of irony, they say Nelson Mandela. It is a remarkable statement, that.
You also spoke last night with the adversary with whom you shared the Nobel Peace Prize, F.W. de Klerk.
That's exactly right. F.W. de Klerk, the white president of South Africa, had been briefed, had brought him out and summoned him so that he could take the measure of this man, knowing that these negotiations had to happen to bring him out of prison and end apartheid. And I asked him, what did he think when he first saw him? And he said, even though I'd read everything about him, I'd been briefed, I was staggered by the dignity of this man, by the tallness of him. He said he stood ramrod straight in that Afrikaner accent. And I think what's so remarkable to listen to Mandela and the people around him, he said we had to understand our adversary. In prison, he got into the mind of the white man. He spoke Afrikaans. He took on the story of the other and therefore was able to negotiate with them.
He always insisted his jailers called him Mr.
That's right,
Mandela.
and they respected him.
Christian Amanpour, thanks very much. Let's go to Josh for today's other top stories.